Planetside 3. If you were to ask the majority of my community here about what game they would hope to see one day, that would be it. A true Planetside 3. I see it all the time in my comments section and in my live stream chats. It's time for a Planetside 3, or when is the sequel to Planetside 2 coming out? All that fun stuff. So, g'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today I want to take us for a bit of a deep dive down the harsh reality of Planetside 3. So, if you've been subscribed to the channel for a while, you may remember that we released a video back in, November 2020, that also talked a little to Planetside 3 and the potential challenges that a sequel to this franchise would face at that time. The video mainly talked to the upfront costs that would stem from working on a sequel, and also the risks that would come from developing a sequel of such a scale, while also trying to maintain content updates for the current title with the development team size that RPG had at the time. I believe this sat at around about 30 people at the time, if my memory served me correctly. I really didn't believe that a sequel was even remotely possible, given the work that would be required to get such a project off the ground. But anyways, fast forwarding the clocks to today, a whole year and a half later since we released that particular video, and a lot has happened since then for Planetside 2. And well, if the activity on Planetside 2 and the scale of the updates that we've been receiving is anything to go by, I think we can confidently say that a Planetside 3 is not in development at Rogue Planet Games right now. Unless there's another secret development team leading that charge to a Planetside 3, or the development team at Rogue Planet Games is bigger than we understand it currently is. There's just simply too much happening for the current game to suggest otherwise, which means that if a Planetside 3 were to happen, we're still years away at best from any kind of playable sequel. And as long as Planetside 2 continues to get the kind of support that it's getting now, that clock is not going to start ticking anytime soon. So that's very much the first, I guess you could call, harsh reality that's attached to Planetside 3 as it stands. But removing the whole time issue from the equation here, I think we've got to be a little bit honest with ourselves about a prospective Planetside 3 from a, let's say, feasibility perspective, folks. There's no debate that Planetside 2's life cycle has been incredibly rocky. Sure, when it released back in 2012, it had an impact on the industry, it was something different, and while 90% of computers couldn't run it at the time, it was so unique and so new that people were just keen to give it a go, even if it did melt their machines. But over the long term, we've seen this game go through some pretty extensive layoffs of staff, and also get completely sidelined for other projects that just ended up being more profitable. In 2015, H1Z1 made its way to the market as a Battle Royale game and quickly swept the world as the new hotness, and soon after, we started seeing development manpower from the Planetside 2 team get moved to assist with H1Z1's development. And that's nothing new for the gaming industry. Surges of team members between projects happens all of the time within publishing studios. In fact, this happens in practically every workplace out there. But after H1Z1 launched, we never really saw that manpower come back to Planetside 2, at least not to the extent in which it left. Planetside 2 very quickly became the afterthought in the eyes of Daybreak Games at the time, effectively putting the game into maintenance mode by the time we reached our late 2010s. So it's no secret that this surge of development resources to H1Z1 was to capitalize on the potential earnings that H1Z1 offered. But the fact that this surge became the norm over time, if you will, tells me one thing. Daybreak Games assessed the return on investment that the Planetside franchise was making against its new business venture, and decided that, well, backing in the BR trend was a safer bet when compared against backing in their unique, quirky MMO FPS franchise. And this right here, folks, loops me back to the whole quote-unquote feasibility point, and the second harsh reality that surrounds a potential Planetside 3. Yes, Planetside has cultivated an incredibly passionate community, but it's also attracted a very select demographic of players. If you were to look at the population graphs over the last few years, then you'll see that it's a community that sits anywhere between 1.5 to 3,000 players strong on average. Sure, we've got some big updates and moments where in which the game sees a ton of new players come through the door or returning players come through the door, but a month or two after that spike, the game returns to its normal population levels. Look at the escalation update in 2020, the update that arguably revived the game and pushed it out of maintenance mode that it was stuck in for years. Well, yes, we saw an increase of 3,000 average players for the month in which the escalation update launched. We lost a very big portion of that gain over the course of the next 3 months. And mind you, this was when we had a global pandemic keeping everyone locked in their homes. And this is a trend that we also see with the majority of Planetside 2's major game updates since the escalation update. A spike in new players coming in to check out the game, only to really ditch back down to normality soon after. And if anything, folks, this tells me that, well, Planetside 2's core gameplay and the reasons the die-hard core community keeps coming back to play this game just doesn't appeal to the masses. It's an obvious statement, I know, but hear me out here. Of course, there are going to be very legitimate design decisions that inform Planetside's gameplay experience that will drive a lot of gamers away, some of which are very important to Planetside's identity. There's of course the scale of the game, or the combined arms nature of the game and the presence of vehicles. Some players aren't going to like that. Or the fact that it's got a pretty significant skill curve in the game due to how chaotic the gameplay can be and the fact that you can be shot from literally anywhere at any given point in time. All of these factors are of course not going to be for everyone who comes to play Planetside 2, and I'm not suggesting that we should forego these elements of the game completely to accommodate a larger portion of players, because, well, then it's not Planetside anymore, isn't it? But on the flip side of that, there are some things in the Planetside gameplay loop that don't need to be there that would still allow Planetside to keep its identity. For one, the way in which the game allows players to win objectives and the overall objective of Planetside to capture continents also doesn't always breed the most enjoyable first-person shooter experiences. I've made my arguments about this time and time again in a previous video, so we won't go over them here today. There is a card linked on your screen now if you're interested in that sort of thing. But the way the gameplay of Planetside unfolds, despite its cool features and back-of-the-box spectacle experience that I have always revered about the game, is quite simply highly unlikely to convert a player into a daily login. And daily logins are the ones who spend money. From a business perspective, peak player counts and the amount of players your update gets through the door at the time of the update is not the key metric for success that you're going to be targeting. It's 100% a metric for success, sure, but I can also almost guarantee that the goal is going to be getting more people playing your game regularly, thus increasing the long-standing average player counts. And the players who stick around and find themselves logging in on the day-to-day are going to be spending more money, justifying the cost of investing in the Planetside project as a whole from a development standpoint. It very much relates to that old adage you hear a lot in, say, a business context or even a sales context from time to time. That being that it's always easier, or sometimes cheaper, to maintain a current customer than it is to onboard a brand new one. The same really goes for Planetside 2, and for video games as a whole for that matter. If you release an update and do a big old marketing campaign to try and get a bunch of people into your game and get them playing it on the regular, if you succeed there and convert 50% of your new players into long-standing players, then you're likely going to have more resources through more cash flow to build a more successful subsequent game update that will then appease to even more players, and then more, and then more, and then more, and you can keep building on this momentum to continue releasing quality products. But on the flip side, if you've got a game like Planetside that, for one, has a significantly high bounce rate for newcomers who don't know how to interact with the game that you've built, and for two, have a game that has significant problems with the game flow that only exacerbates the first problem of a high bounce rate, then what you have is a franchise that is simply not feasible to work on in the long run and expect a solid return on investment for. You don't have the cash flow and the capital to experience organic growth. Game development is a business after all, and while yes, we can go on all day talking about how passion fuels the industry, so does money, especially in the online space where server upkeep costs are going to require ongoing funding to support. When you have a game that bounces the majority of its potential target audience due to these factors, you have a game that as a concept does not pass the feasibility assessment to get made in the first place. That is one of the harshest realities of a potential Planetside 3 in the future, and the reason why I believe a sequel to this franchise is highly unlikely to ever occur. I remember watching a stream that was run by a good friend of mine in the content creation space who goes by the name of Deeg. If you haven't heard of him yet, he runs an excellent podcast that I've had the pleasure of appearing on a couple of times now, and he has a really interesting set of videos about life, gaming, and all that fun stuff that I really recommend you go check out. He's got a really cool perspective on these sorts of things. I'll leave a link to his channel down below if that interests you, but in the stream in question, he reacted to my 2023 priorities video for Planetside 2, and he raised a notion that Planetside is not a game that aims to attract dedicated players, and instead targets a more casual audience that will check out the game maybe once, maybe twice a month at best, if not in a more, I guess you could call, seasonal rotation. And he posited that this was okay for the game, and I agree with him to a certain extent. If that's the audience you want to cultivate, then you most certainly can do that. But the harsh reality of that is that you are simply not going to set yourself up for a position to go to an executive of the publishing company that you're under and argue the feasibility for a sequel to your franchise with much success. It's the reason that Planetside Arena launched the way it did. It's very clear that in order for the game to pass the feasibility assessment and to actually get made, it could take some inspiration from the Planetside franchise and its core, yes, but it needed to play vastly differently to its predecessor. It needed to play more like a traditional shooter to be worth the risk. And, well, in turn, it alienated the core audience that loved Planetside for what it was. The long and short of it is that the MMO FPS genre requires a significant player base and cash flow from said player base to justify the investment from any game company to make happen. And unfortunately, I think Planetside 2 has proven that the required player base just isn't there, at least in this form, and at least not right now. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the harsh reality of Planetside 3. And while yes, we do end on a bit of a somber note here in today's video, I want to go on the record by saying that, Jesus Christ, I hope I am wrong. I would love to see a Planetside 3 one day, because I really do believe that the franchise has got a ways to go. It's got more to prove, and it's got far more that it can accomplish, with the right design decisions in mind. But while I do like to be an optimist wherever I can, I do also choose to be a realist when I have to be, and I feel like this is one of those situations where a bit of realism does need to come into the equation. In saying that, guys, I want to hear from you guys in the comment section down below as to whether or not you think I'm right. Do you think a Planetside 3 is on the cards one day, or do you think the ship has unfortunately sailed a long time ago? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed today's video, a like would go a long way, and I'd really appreciate the support on the channel. And if you're new here and you did enjoy the content, consider hitting that subscribe button whilst you're at it, guys, to stay up to date with all future videos that we release here. It does go a long way. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care. Have a good one.